Hello, welcome back. Let's just go ahead in this lecture, and talk about our integumentary system. So first, I'd like to go ahead and ask you a question. And that is this. What is the biggest organ in your body? Monty, do you know? Where's your head? I think you're over here. Where are you? There you are. Do you know what it is? So the biggest organ in your body is your skin. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the skin is actually made up of several types of tissues. So we have the epidermis, which is mostly stratified squamous epithelium, as I was showing you in some of those pictures from the last little bit there. And then we have the dermis, which is connective tissue, smooth muscle, nervous tissue, and blood. Because I was talking about in last chapter, a lot of the epidermis the stratified squamous epithelium, usually gets all its nutrients from the basement membrane, and that's what the dermis basically is going on here. A lot of the stuff gets fed, the epidermis gets fed off of the dermis. Which is why, if you get cut, if you get cut lightly, nothing happens because, I don't know if you've ever gotten like a scratch on your fingers and you're like, where'd that come from? But you don't bleed because it only cut through the epidermis. But then if you get a deep enough cut and you start, bleeding, congratulations, you've reached the dermis in the most painful way. So anyway, and then underneath that is a hypodermis or subcutaneous layer. And so that's the areolar and adipose tissues that technically are not part of the skin, but basically attach the skin to the rest of us so that way we don't look like freaky, creatures wearing a human suit. So anyway, and let's talk about the epidermis. So the epidermis, as I just mentioned, has no blood vessels. It's getting all of its nutrients off of the dermis underneath. And it goes from the bottom up. And so the lowest layer next to the dermis, these are the ones that are well fed, is the stratum basale. And now you're going to find a whole bunch of different cells hanging out in between here, and they're really kind of cool, and we're going to get into them. But basically, these are the stem cells down here that get fed by the dermis, and these are the ones that are constantly going through mitosis. I mean, these ones right here in the stratum basale are the ones that have all the nutrients, and they start just going crazy, and they start, making more and more and more skin cells. And as these skin cells move up, they actually slowly die because they've been cut off from all the blood supply in the dermis. And as they do this, they actually get harder, flatter, thinner. And as they do this, we call that keratization because they turn into keratinocytes, which are these dead things right here that slough off in layers. So, like an ogre, we're an onion of layers of skin. Yeah. Trying to go for things here. Anyway, so they get pushed up further and further away. And we name the layers basically after what's happening as they change. Like stratum spinosum, they have all these little things happening between them, these little dendrites coming out. And so also there's our friend the dendritic cell. We'll talk about him in a minute. There's melanocytes. This is where we get the color in our skin. They make melanin. We'll talk about them and what they do in a minute. And they're actually really, really cool. The dendritic cells are basically those white blood cells I mentioned earlier that actually like to go hanging out and moving around in between here. Just in case this breaks and somebody tries to get in, they're already on the scene and ready to eat. So now you'll notice right here as they die, they'll start getting this granular look in their cytoplasm. Excuse me. And that's called the stratum granulosum, so it's literally named after the granulation. Then they turn pretty clear. That's the stratum lucidum. And then they go into the part that the stratum corneum, which is the part, it's all dead keratinocytes, and this is the part that flakes off all the time. Unless you're Monty, and you just wait for, everybody to go at the same time, and then you shed and build up a ton of oil underneath. which, again, I'm not, as I mentioned last chapter, I'm not entirely sure that's the way to go. I think we've got a better beat on things. It takes a lot of effort for him to shed. Anyway, that needs an old man, so. Anyway, so we go from young to old cells at the top. So these guys are cheap to make, and we're always making them, and we're always losing them. But that's literally why it's so important, because they're always moving up and out and dying and then turning into the layer that sloughs off. Because that sloughing off doesn't give anybody to grab onto, and because of it, we're flaking off constantly. It's one of your barriers. It's called a mechanical barrier, so that way things don't get in and get you sick and or dead. Right, Monty? Right. So, there's two flavors of skin. There's thin skin and thick skin. Now, thin skin is pretty much what your entire body is covered of. But thick skin is what's on your palms of your hand and the soles of your feet. That's because it has 5 layers, because it's a lot tougher, because A, we're walking around on our feet all the time, and B, we're constantly touching everything with our hands. So we need an extra little bit of layer just in case we do something dumb, which, is occasionally for me often. Anyway, just saying, because, I do sewing, and because my son, we do cosplay as a family. My son comes up with the idea, and I usually try to make it happen. So we've shown up as a threesome several times. So occasionally I'm the one manning the sewing machine, making sure everybody's got their costumes. So I've needled myself before, both by manually sewing and using the machine. Not looking where my fingers are going. Luckily I've never really damaged myself on the machine, thank God, because anyway, moving on. So basically, that's what we're talking about. So that 5th layer, the stratum lucidium, you don't see that on thin skin. So you see the corneum, the granulosum, the spinosum, and the basale, but you do not see the lucidium unless it's the palms of your hand or the soles of your feet. So that's the part that's different between the thin skin and the thick skin. Okay? All right. Awesome. Now, this is a fake picture. Let me say this right up. I have somebody go, every single year. This is a fake picture I found. So anyway, it's kind of funny. So yeah, this is literally, I decided, if the skin is rubbed or pressed too much, you get calluses and corns. This is literally a picture of somebody who had glued corn kernels to their feet as a joke. And I thought it was too weird not to post. So this is fake. This is corn kernels. This is not some kind of deranged kind of skin condition. It's just somebody glued corn kernels to someone's foot for a weird picture to make everybody go. So trigger warning, this is fake. So anyway, but it is, if you've watched, like I've watched, once you go down, like I mentioned in the last lecture, once you go down watching Pimple Popper, you start getting some other interesting things pop up. So yeah, I've seen some people with some calluses and corns that are just absolutely insane. So on YouTube and whatnot, and TLC, that channel always has some insane medical shows. All right, so about 90% of the epidermis is keratinocytes, so we're constantly sloughing them off. Like I said, they're cheap to make. We're always making them constantly. It's literally how we protect ourselves. It's just this layers moving out. So if anybody tries to weasel their way in, they kind of get pushed out over time. Now, about 5% is melanocytes, which make the pigment melanin, which absorbs ultraviolet radiation to protect the other cells. So melanocytes are pretty cool because they have these dendrites sticking out, and they make melanin. And the melanin comes out. So, and now, crazy part about this is no matter what your skin color is, we all have the same number of melanocytes. It's just how much melanin they're pumping out. So we actually all have the same number of the cells that make melanin. It's just some of us make more than other people. Like me, I don't make any because my ancestors were dumb and decided to move from the equator up to north where there wasn't a lot of sunshine, it was colder, and therefore we decided over many, many generations to lose all our nice skin color. because we weren't really getting that much sun. So we wanted to absorb as much vitamin D as we possibly could. So that's why we went pasty pale. Whereas people whose ancestors stayed around the equator have darker skin because they stayed where the sun is hitting the earth predominantly, and therefore they needed more ultraviolet radiation protection before we invented sunscreen. Now, fact is there's also, because of this, depending on where your ancestors moved away from the equator to go freeze their bums off, or, stay at the equator and stayed nice and roasty toasty. Because, I'm sorry, my ancestors, it's like, I hate the cold. I just hate the cold. I hate the cold. Don't you hate the cold, Monty? Yep. He actually would die if it gets too cold, so. So anyway, where was I going with this? It actually has a lot to do with vitamin D consumption, too. That's actually an interesting correlation, is the fact that a lot of people who have way more, whose melanocytes make more melanin, are more prone to be lactose intolerant. Reason being is because they get all the vitamin D they need from all the sunshine, which is why you see a lot of lactose intolerance in darker skin colors. And then the reverse, all us pasty people, because we weren't getting enough sun, we had to find that vitamin D somewhere else, and we got it through milk. So that's why, and other milk products. So that's why a lot of pasty people, like me, who make the bacon sizzle noise when we go out in the sun for too long. Ugh. Anyway. Anyway, that's why I'm a nerd. I stay in the indoors and go, yeah, in the sun. Except when I go outdoors and go, I'm going to play in my garden, and then I'm like, I am now made of burn. So anyway, that's why, you don't see a lot of lactose intolerance in us pasty people because we needed more vitamin D. We get that from milk and other lactose products. So it's an interesting flip-flop that, the people who put out more melanin are more likely not to need, milk products, and because of that, they don't have the enzyme to break down milk as well as we do, us white crazy people, and those of us without, that don't make a lot of melanin, are sitting here, we need the milk because, we weren't getting enough UV light to help make it. Because actually that's what it does, is when you go outside, we actually need the sunlight to make our own vitamin D. So, hope you enjoyed my vitamin D rant. Anyway, so the last 5% are the Langerhans cells, which kill off invaders. They're made in the bone marrow. These are these guys, these dendritic / Langerhans cells. They're moving around, looking for trouble. Just in case you happen to step on a tack and, break skin and stuff like that. So we've always got white blood cells on the move all throughout your body. And we do have checkpoints, though. That's your lymphatic system, and we'll talk about him next semester. So anyway, so the dermis. The dermis is underneath the epidermis. And so it's made up of 2 layers. You've got the upper papillary dermis, which is basically areolar connective tissue, and dermal papillae, which actually give shape to our epidermis, and it gives us fingerprints and footprints. My snake's going in my hair now. And the lower reticular dermis, which is down here, and it's dense, irregular connective tissue, gives our skin toughness and elasticity, as I was mentioning last time, if you know how you're hydrated or not from pinching your skin. Anyway, so yeah, the crazy part, how does this all happen? How do fingerprints happen? Actually, it happens because when we're in the womb, the pressure of the amniotic fluid actually forces that to happen. So so imagine it's like being in the bathtub and you get your pruny fingers, but it's as you're developing, so it gives you the swirls and the whirls of your fingerprints and footprints on the upper papillary dermis, which then gives the shape to your epidermis. Oh, by the way, next time you see somebody with some skin showing, like me and my flabby arms, you can walk up and go, your epidermis is showing. I'm here for you with the bad jokes, guys. It's my job. Science, bad jokes. All right, the dermis. So again, dermal blood vessels supply nutrients to all the skin cells. They contain muscle fibers, so that way we can smile and frown and make strange faces and all sorts of weird things. And also, makes your skin wrinkle. You get the dimples. All right, two main types of nerve cells. You got your motor nerve cells and your sensory nerve cells. Again, we're going to talk about these a little later that get their own chapters, especially the sensor. We have a lot of different types of sensory nerve cells. So that gives us different sensations. And like I said, we're going to get into that in chapter 11. Yeah, I think 11. So we actually have different sensory, 11 and 12. Yeah, 11 and 12. So we have different sensory types of nerve cells so that gives us touch as well as deeper feelings as well, and pain and heat and cold. So also contains nails, hair, and skin glands. So that way we can have glowy skin, or in my case, kind of slightly oily skin. I've always been an oil manufacturer. Monty doesn't have hair, but he does have scales, which is technically where hair came from. Anyway, that's a different story for another time. All right, so nails are made up of two parts. You got your nail bed and your nail plate, which is, the part that you put your polish on. If you do the polishing, I do the polishing. Actually, it's one of the things everybody's like, you can learn different things over COVID break. I learned how to do my nails. Anyway. And the nail bed, which is basically where the nail plate is growing out of. And nail plate is the most active growing region. I was blessed with pretty quick growing nails, so luckily I've got pretty good nails, but I've met a lot of people that go, my nails don't grow very fast. But they actually grow faster than you think. I'll tell you a fun fact about how we used to mistake vampires back in the day. Back when we thought, vampires were a real thing and not something that tween girls go, and Edward Sparkles or something like that. I'm not referring to a certain movie book franchise, but I am. We used to think people were vampires because their skin would grow after death, or their nails would grow after death. And actually, their nails weren't growing. Nothing grows. You're dead. Nothing's growing. What happens is the skin right here that they call the cuticle and the proximal nail fold and the epidermis actually shrivels up and kind of goes back, so the skin shrivels up. So it looks like our nails got longer when in fact it's just the skin shriveling back. So that's one of the things. They're like, oh no, they've turned into a vampire. Quick, stake them. That was one of them. Another one was blood coming down, and that happened because this was before, we had undertakers that would, actually go in and, they do the things to prepare the body. This was before. And yeah, some blood would leak out. So, just from everything putrefying. So inside the casket. So they'd reopen the casket and they'd see the nails were longer. They're like, oh, the nails have grown, and oh, there's blood, and oh, it's a vampire. Quick, stake it. It was just a dead corpse doing dead corpse things. So there you go. So no, your nails and your hair do not grow after death. It's just your skin recedes and it kind of looks like it. So anyway. So no, there weren't vampires. Or at least not those kind of well, I don't know. I don't know about the sparkling vampires, but, Anyway, hair comes from a group of epidermal stem cells called a hair follicle. Now, we're actually learning why these go white. I was just reading a fascinating article on this. I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, color is determined by genes that code for either eumelanin, which is brown-black, or phenomelanin, which is reddish-yellow, which is where we get our hair colors that aren't the ones that come out of the box. So, and everybody's got a mix. Like, if you're blonde, you've got predominantly phenomelanin. If you're red, you've definitely predominantly got phenomelanin. So it just depends, which, if it's going towards the red spectrum or if it's going towards the yellow spectrum. People who have brown-black hair, the darker your hair is, that means you have more eumelanin. Than anything else. So, for instance, I'm brown-haired, so I'm a mix because I definitely got the red because my great-grandma, she was a flaming redhead, and it's definitely gone down through the family. So I've got definite red highlights and blonde highlights in my hair. So I've got phenolmelanin and eumelanin. Now, people who have darker hair than me, you got way more eumelanin. Now, everybody's got a mix of these two now. So, but if you're super blonde or red, you pretty much, your eumelanin may not be hanging out at all, and you might be completely phenolmelanin. Anyway, so that's color. Now, I was reading it was interesting, the article I was reading, the reason we're losing color is because these stem cells inside the hair follicle are actually kind of getting buried. And if we could figure out, and that's why our hair just goes white, because the stem cells that make the color, which is eumelanin or phenolmelanin, are getting buried under other cells, and because of that, they're putting out their color pigments, but it never reaches because they're buried, and they're like here, and they keep getting buried, and then no color is given, and you get gray and white hair. So we're figuring out now, all right, now that we know that happens, how do we unbury our stem cells so we can keep our color? So now we know at least why our hair is going gray or white. And I've been noticing more and more, certainly on my head. But that's okay. That's nature. I've always promised myself that when I completely go white, I will completely dye my hair purple and just be a purple crazy person. Because purple is my favorite color, and why not? So anyway, glands. Again, we talked about these guys. We touched on them last chapter, but we're going to touch on them again. So, sebaceous glands. These are Holoclin glands. Like I said, they're found around hair follicles, corner of your lips. So if you ever get a lot of zits around the corner of your lips, that's why. Parts of our reproductive organs. They are not found on thick skin. So you don't find these guys on the palms or bottoms of your feet. So that's why you don't get acne on your hands. Thank God. Can you imagine getting pimples on your hands and your feet? I mean, I had a couple times where I've had a disease where things popped up all over my hands and my feet, which was very, very painful. Viruses occasionally do that to you. But anyway, I went to a doctor, and I couldn't really do anything except let it run its course, and I just had to sit there. I couldn't pick up anything. It hurt so bad because the little suckers were painful, so I had to let my students, this was back when I was teaching high school, let them run the class, because I was just like, yeah, guys, I can't pick up anything, please. Here, you guys write the notes. They were very happy. I actually did that for the rest of the semester. They were happy to share writing the notes up at the big screen. Anyway, sweat glands. These are known as pseudo-odoriferous glands. Gee, I wonder why it has odoriferous in it, or ophirous, because smelly. Anyway, so the American or eccrine sweat glands are located all over our body and help regulate temperature. We have them on our thick skin too, which is why your palms get sweaty. And these guys right here, like I said, as I mentioned earlier, they're really just getting I almost said sugar water. No, salty water out. We don't really get rid of toxins through sweating. We really, really don't. The only way toxins come out of our body is through our kidneys. So, yay, kidneys. That's why we need them so badly. And then we got our apocrine sweat glands, which unfortunately secrete the scent, which, is why we get the BO. The thing that, they all hate, yet some of my high school freshman boys used to just, instead of taking the shower they were supposed to after, they thought, I'll just hide all our BO under all the Axe body spray. No. Don't do that to people. Okay, with that said, that's the front half of this chapter. So I hope you didn't mind my rants about vitamin D collection and melanin, and I hope you found everything interesting and useful. So I'll let you go, and we'll talk to you in just a moment. Bye.